And so this young kid pulls up at my house, the gentleman I was doing the mortgage with, and he was a few years younger than I was. And he pulls up in a black 911, black on black convertible Carrera Turbo, right? Mm-hmm. And so at that age, cars were still important to me, and they're not necessarily now. But of course, I wanted to know how did you're 20? I was 29. I think he was probably 26. Like, how'd you get that? And he's like, doing this, mortgages, right? And I was like, really? And I said, do you guys have an extra spot on the team? And he said, let me check. And he called me back, and he said yes. And so it was at that point that I broke away from corporate America. And at that time, you had to have a year's worth of experience before you could start your own mortgage brokerage in Florida. That was kind of the legal proceeding, if you will. And so I went to work for the shop he worked at, and then a year later, I was up and running and had my own brokerage. Yeah.
So you went from corporate America to starting your own mortgage brokerage.
Yes.
In a year.
Yeah.
All right. So before we jump in that, okay, what were you doing exactly in corporate America?
I'd had a couple jobs. I was prior to taking that first leap, I worked for Johnson & Johnson in pharmaceuticals.
Mm-hmm. A sales rep?
A sales rep, yeah. Which, the funny thing is I thought that was my dream job, and once I got it, I despised it.
What did you despise about it?
It's not so much, I think, what I despised about it as much as what it showed me about me. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it showed me, you'll get a kick out of this, but it showed me that if I got a steady paycheck, that I'm going to go to work at 10 and come home at 3.
That sounds very familiar.
It wasn't until I had to, for lack of a better term, eat what you kill, when I began to really perform at a much, much higher level.
So not really the model employee.
No, not at all. But I knew I was better than that, but it was because of I was a kid working for J&J, 24, 25 years old, making a big salary, company car, all the good stuff, and it was kind of like a race to the bottom because I was like, man, I'm good,
What were you making when you quit? I mean, this is a while ago, but for perspective.
Yeah, when I was 29 years old, I would say I was probably making at that point maybe close to $100,000.
Okay.
That was a long time ago too.
Yeah,
it's a crazy thing, right? That was almost 20 years ago.
But it's just because one of the things that we talk about is good is the enemy of great, which is you have a good salary, it's even harder to quit. So how were you still able to make the leap? Because that's a question I get. Like, when's the right time to quit? But you were making good money. So how did you figure out it was still the right thing to do to quit?
I don't know that you ever know it's the right thing to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a scary process to shift from a steady paycheck to not having a steady paycheck, right? It is a leap of faith in yourself. But I think for me, the way that I did it was, it's not that I had a bunch of money at that time. It's just that I went and got a home equity line of credit. And
really familiar story.
Yeah. I got a home equity line of credit for $40,000, and I used that to start the business. And part of it too, I kind of transitioned again. Out for a year, I worked for someone else, right? So I was able to learn the business and get a certain level of confidence before I technically started on my own, which was a year after leaving corporate America.
What did you do in your first year in mortgages?
I mean, like, what do you mean? What did I do?
Volume, commissions.
Oh gosh, I don't even remember. Yeah.
Did you come out of the gate flying, or was it a struggle?
I came out of the gate doing pretty good, but I can't take credit for it, which is funny because it relates to what we talked about at our event this week. How we were talking about how, listen, everybody thinks they're a rock star right now, and I told everyone it's 50% you and 50% the market. Mm-hmm. I was in a similar situation when during the early 2000s there was a boom going on. Not only was there a construction boom from a housing perspective, but rates were dropping, which also created a refinance boom, right? Mm-hmm. So I was killing two barrels of fish at that time, right? So I did well. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I can tell you I did well, and then not necessarily because was a rock star at that time, more so, but because
the market, time to be a loan officer.
Yeah, the market was fantastic.
So you go from loan officer to starting a brokerage after 1 year, which is kind of aggressive. So how was that journey?
I'm aggressive, Steve.
You are aggressive. So how was that journey?
Yeah, I think that's always scary, but I had felt like for the majority of my life that I was going to have my own business, right? So, but you take a loan out on your house, you have even though even though I was in sales, I didn't have any real corporate experience as far as how to grow a team, how to manage a team, how to do any of that stuff, right? And you just kind of, you walk into it blindly, and that's the part that's scary. And I think when you're young, even when you're old, a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with building a team, right? It's kind of like, hey, sit down there, do what I need you to do, make me some money, and if you can try not to bother me in the process, that would be great, right? And we all know that model is very limited in scope.
Yeah,
so
it might have worked in the 1970s,
right.
Not so much today.
Right. So it was, it was a fun ride. Again, things were explosive at that time. I think when we kind of peaked out before the market crashed, the store started in 2008. We had about 14 loan officers, three processors, and we were in there banging. You didn't have to do.
You started the brokerage? No,
Yeah.
The mortgage brokerage. You started in 2008.
Mm-hmm. No. I started in probably 2001.
Right.
And I'm saying in 2008 is when everything started.
Took a slight turn.
I think more so like the wheels began to fall off.
Yeah. So, we saw a lot of people that did really well,
mm-hmm.
and they lost everything. And in some ways, okay, so you're included in that category.
Yeah.
So what was how high did you get? Mm-hmm. And then what happened?
Yeah, I think when the wheels started to fall off at that time, and we were probably cranking out anywhere on a month-to-month basis, 75 to 100 loans a month. Yeah, we were banging. But again, I can't say enough about the fact that it was so much about the market. It's like it's not that you really needed a sophisticated mortgage, but you need somebody to answer the phone, right? It wasn't really salespeople; it was order takers.
Yeah, well, at that time.
Yeah. Things, that's when the financial crisis kind of hit, started to everything to unfold in 2008.
But did you have like big house, bunch of houses, fancy cars?
Relative to that phase of my life? Yeah. I was spending everything. I had gotten my first house that was always a dream of mine, a house on the water. I got my first house on the water, had beautiful cars, was, spending all my money.
Weren't really saving a whole lot.
No. I've got a lot of wisdom at this phase of my life, and it comes from getting your teeth kicked in during those time frames.
It's interesting. See, it didn't matter how successful you were. A lot of people all got reset to zero.
Well, you've been in CG, I guess, for 11 or 12 months now, and I would almost think that you've probably heard me say this multiple times: making money is a skill set. Mm-hmm. Keeping money is a discipline.
Right.
And at that time, I had no discipline. But after you get a little, ass whipping, for lack of a better term, you start to appreciate that they're two completely
different skills.
Yeah.
So what were your lessons?
That's one of them,
mm-hmm.
right? Making money is a skill set. Keeping is a discipline. I have a whole different financial philosophy now than I did then. But I, number one was to live below my means, which I do very much to this day. Live below my means, making money is a skill set, keeping it's a discipline, having a plan of what to do with what you keep. I think, and again, I don't know that these were my lessons now, but I think for the folks listening, there's probably a bigger value from sharing the wisdom I've learned over time between mm-hmm. then and the 14, 15 years since then. Would be I follow what's called the Profit First model, right? There's a gentleman named Mike Michalowicz, and he wrote mm-hmm. a book called Profit First, and it's really about he kind of turns the traditional model of sales minus expenses equals profit mm-hmm. on its head, right? He says profit is more than a line item on the bottom right-hand corner of your P&L. It must be extracted. It must be taken mm-hmm. from the business on purpose. And so, following his model, really, the goal, first of all, I think it's critically important I think a lot of real estate investors make a mistake of trying to create passive income too soon.
Really?
I think the best way to create a lot of passive income is to have a just radical active income, mm-hmm. right?
Then sure, that helps.
Oh, yeah, right? Yeah. And then the passive side becomes easy. Mm-hmm. But that model is really, there's like 5 different bank accounts. There's your cash flow account for your business. There's your retained earnings for your business, so that like when something like last March breaks out, mm-hmm. that if you've got retained earnings, you're like, okay, this is not going to be fun, but we're going to make it through because mm-hmm. we've been smart. We have retained earnings in the business, and then there's effectively the retained earnings for your family, if mm-hmm. you will, right, to make sure that regardless of what happens in your business, that your family is going to be okay, right? And then there's your money that you're going to invest. And then there's obviously the tax man, Uncle Sam, your business partner.
Uncle Sam always he always has a seat at the dinner table.
He does. I found him to be a pig, quite honestly. He's always gobbling. It's like, come on, man. But
I want to touch on something here because we're talking about profit first. Because we've had other people come on the show and they're talking about the importance of paying yourself. Mm-hmm. And there's always afterwards I see comments like, no, as a grinder, you got to put it all back in the business, mm-hmm. which I used to have that mindset, and I was always broke. Mm-hmm. So what would you say?
Yeah, well, I think there's danger unless you have visions of creating a quote unquote unicorn like an Uber or the $1 billion company. I mean, unless you have a dream like that, the reality of it is that 99% of entrepreneurs following that model can be, quite honestly, can be dangerous, because if you put all your money back into your business, you can scale yourself out of profitability, and then if you hit a bump, you're not prepared for that bump or have any money, like I said, retained earnings or what have you, to make it through the bump, you can come off the rails completely, and so I think it's important. Now, granted, you do have to get to a spot where I call it, you got to get to a spot where your business has got CPR, right? You do need to get to a spot where your business is profitable consistently, predictably, and reliably, right? And then at that point, I think you need to be disciplined in taking money and putting it into some of the different facets that we just talked about, right? But everybody has their own journey. That's one of the things we talked about this week at CG, mm-hmm. right? For 1 in a million folks that is putting every penny back into the business, it works out. For most, it doesn't, because you scale yourself out of your profitability. All your money get, more people, more deals, more, and then you hit a bump and you got no oxygen.
Well, and that's what I was telling my wife, like when COVID first struck, was that I felt bad for all the entrepreneurs that have been sacrificing all these years waiting to extract, and then you get this massive speed bump, and now like those 7 years, 15 years of sacrifice, and that's all gone.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, now, we've obviously been very fortunate
the way
blessed. COVID turned out. Our industry relative to some has
industry has.
Oh, yeah. Right. We were
not the restaurant industry.
Right. Very fortunate. Right. So I'll never forget when that broke out. We were in CG last March, and I did a little video saying, if you got any questions about whether or not you're going to make it through this, the answer doesn't lie on your P&L. It lies on your balance sheet.
Exactly.
Right. And some people focus merely on building a business, when in fact you should also be focusing on building a balance sheet.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of wisdom there that might be missed, but it's
sometimes
important.
You got to get popped in the mouth first before you listen, to somebody. Yeah,
right.
That's just what...
When a student is ready, the master will appear.
Exactly.
So, all right, so things kind of fell off the rails a little bit.
Mm-hmm. All of it. Business, marriage, whole, all of it. Yeah.
So that's 08. So then what was your next step in your journey?
So I just kind of looked up and said, I got a skill set that I've developed doing mortgages. What can I do with that skill set? And that was at the time when everything was being short sold. And so I was like, well, I will begin processing short sale loans, or not short sale loans, but short sale packages for real estate agents, right?
Oh, I didn't know you were doing that.
Yeah. Oh, well, it was miserable.
Doesn't sound fun at all.
I'm a people pleaser, And no matter how good you were at doing that, because of the length of time that it took to get it done, nobody was ever happy, even if you did a great job, right? And I couldn't stomach that, right?
You're like a host at a busy restaurant. It doesn't matter.
Exactly, right? You walk in, you want to be, you don't care. I don't care you're busy. I want to sit down now,
right?
And that's not how it works. So at that time, that's really, I was like, I can't stand this. I want to make people happy, right? And so then I transitioned to actually flipping short sales. And during that, I was just getting the hang of it, right? Just getting the hang of it. And you could do dry closings, which means you could use the end buyer's money that you were flipping it to close your deal. Just as I was and I needed that because I didn't have any money. Right? I was broke. I needed that. And just about the time I was getting the hang of it, they changed the rules across the country where you had to do wet funding, which means, listen, you got to bring your own funds up front to close the deal, then you can turn around and sell it. Well, I remember that conversation with my title agent. She called and she said, listen, we got a problem. You got to bring your own money to this closing today because the rules have changed. And I was like, Barb, what are we going to do? We got a big problem here. She's like, no, baby, we don't have a big problem. You got a big problem, right? And it was a $402,000 problem. That was the closing on that deal. And then we were selling it for $495 the same day. And I called a friend of mine, a guy named Stephen Dahlhair, and I was like, man, I'm in a jam. He's big money. Mm-hmm. I was like, I'm in a jam. I need $402,000 for a couple of hours. And he's like, well, what are you going to kick back when it comes back in a couple of hours? And I was like, 2 points, right? Like $8,400. And he's like, wait a minute, I'm going to send you this, and like today you're going to send it back with $8,400. And I was like, yes. And so that's exactly what happened. And you can imagine his question the moment we finished that transaction.
How many of these can we do?
Yeah. Can we do this again? Yeah. Right. And I said, well, if this is a problem for me, it's obviously a problem for everyone.
Well, it's an industry problem now.
Yeah. And so we set out at that point to form what was called iVisionary Financial. And we knew that would have a limited lifespan, either for a variety of reasons. Either the banks wouldn't want you to do it, or the short sales would come to an end, or whatever. But we had a fantastic run, which is that's really where I kind of, for lack of a better term, began to recover and get back on top, if you will, from that drubbing I had taken. We started iVisionary Financial Solutions, and for about 4 years, we got to the point where we were lending about $75 to $100 million a year off of only a $5 million credit facility, because it was you didn't need
transactional funding.
Yeah, you didn't need a ton of money because it was always coming in and out, right? And so.
Pretty good ROI for your buddy there.
Well, I used to pull it up on my calculator and plug it in, and it would just come up and say good enough. Yeah, it was it was great for both of us. Or there was actually another partner, a guy named Dan Rose, and we had the business split evenly, and we all three of us just did fantastic. I would go get the business. Dan would do the docs and vet the title companies, and Steven was the money man, And so,
wow.
Yeah.
But that's not around anymore.
No. That was, again, that kind of got, transactional funding was hot at that time, and because of all the short sales, and as the industry began to get back on its feet, it kind of phased out, and then lenders started putting what you call deed restrictions on there.
Well, that was my next question, because short sales, that was something that came, 90-day deed restrictions, 120-day deed restrictions.
Yeah, and so that slowly began to suffocate that business.
Right.
But the cool part is that right at when that was starting to happen, I had started CG, and so I took my foot off the gas of one and put my foot on the gas.
And when was that?
I started CG about it's actually 11 years ago this month.
Okay.
Yeah. So whatever.
So COVID was your 10-year anniversary present.
Yeah. March of last year. Yeah. Happy birthday to you.
Yeah.
Right?
That's awesome. All right. So what compelled you to start CG?
I'd love to give you this fabulous story and tell you it was a calculated decision, but the reality of it was, I came to be like super candid today, it was kind of an accident. I was in a mastermind that wasn't necessarily real estate specific, and I saw the model, and at the time I had built a list. We used to lend people money at iVisionary by doing webinars about showing how people were flipping the houses, and then we'd say, hey, you go out and find the flip and we'll fund it. And I built up a respectful following at that time, and also knew who were doing a lot of deals, because there are hey, this person, right. we lent money to this person 8 times this month, we lent to that person 11 times this month, right? And so I saw the model and was like, hey, there's really nobody doing this in our space. And I started it as just honestly a side project. Another way to make
side hustle is what the kids are calling it.
Yeah, the side hustle. Yeah. Another way to make a few bucks. And then once it got rolling into it, realized that this model tapped into something that I didn't know was one of my, like, a God-given talent, and that's connecting people.
You are a connector.
Yeah. I love it, man. Yeah. I love putting two people together, and then like they'll call or shoot me a text and like, hey man, you introduced me to this person and this person, like this just happened this week. I walk into CG, and a gentleman named Jim Shields called me, I don't know, it was maybe six or 8 months ago, and said, hey, I've got this project. It's about a $26 million ground up construction on an RV resort. I put them together with Brian Yarnell, another CG member. And here we are, we show up at CG, and I walk in, and Brian and Jim's like, hey man, Brian funded that $26 million deal, and I'm like, no, that's cool stuff, man. I dig that. Really, and that'll probably change both of their lives.
Yeah.
That's for relative in size to what they've been doing. That's a pretty big deal, right? So
26 million is a pretty good size.
Yeah, that's a pretty good size deal. That's not necessarily even commonplace on a daily basis with what I'm doing, right? But I love connecting, when Mark Delatour says, hey, we're going to scale into different markets, and he starts using the connections in CG, those wholesalers, to provide him product that he can turnkey. And when, it's just like, man, that's...
Well, Jason Lewis and I
cool.
were talking 2 days ago. I was like, dude, I've got this product. I think that it would be good for your clients. It would be good for my clients. And it's basically just having a computer listen to the calls and say, this is what's working, or this is what your guy's screwing up.
Yeah.
Like, just... more collaboration.
Yeah.
Right? Just because we're hanging out.
Yeah. To me, that's the best part of CG. Yeah. That's what I dig doing. That's the best part of CG. Just, guys and gals getting together and complimenting one another and making things easier.
Yeah. So I guess when you started it, your database was Florida, or is it nationwide?
It was nationwide. Yeah.
So you're doing transactional funding nationwide.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you had a pretty good database. You had a pretty good book of business to get started.
Yeah, decent. I had a decent start. I think there were 9 or 10 folks at that first Collective Genius.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what does it look like today in there?
So today we have 2 different levels. We just launched one. I'll get into that in a minute. But right now we have about 160, I guess you'd say businesses, memberships, if you will. And a lot of those folks have business partners. So the amount of people that are in what we call CG Premier is probably in the 250 range. But it's comprised of about 160 businesses. And some of those people have business partners, which gets us to 250. But it's some of the top players. And the majority of it is in the single family space. We've got some other disciplines, multifamily, self-storage, et cetera. But majority of the top players in the country, almost everybody in there is doing 100 plus transactions a year and just killing it, and not the key thing for me too is not just their volume or how much money they're making or keeping or all that stuff, but also that excellence in the business side needs to be combined with excellence on the human beings, right? And the reason you're talking to Jason Lewis or other people you're doing business with is because they're decent human beings, Not everybody's perfect, right?
Oh, no, we're not perfect.
Yeah, no, I'm not claiming that. But and we get together once a quarter, like we just did here in Scottsdale last week, and we go through what we call hot seats, and it's basically you get rock star individuals getting up and in my room, for example, you had Dan Lane, who'll probably do close to 250 deals this year and has a portfolio of 130 units. You had Doug Hopkins and Damon Lyons, who will do close to 400 deals, and it's just a stacked,
bonkers numbers.
Yeah, bonkers. Or guys like Jay, you just brought up Jason Lewis. I mean, the kid's 33 years old, and I don't want to throw him under the table, but he does his net doesn't start with a 1. His combined business is at 32, 33 years old. It's in the that's the caliber of investors that are in CG. And when you get everybody together, it's just the magic happens,
Right.
And, it's you get a guy like Ryan Pineda saying, hey, I've got this amazing following on social media. I'm looking to possibly start a fund. Can you connect me with some guys who can do that? And I'm like, well, why don't you consider you raise the money instead of getting involved in running and managing the fund? Let me introduce you to Ken Majumdar, right? Like, he's a guy has a fund, he's got like $400 million of assets under management. Let me introduce you to Ken. Maybe you can do what you do best, right? Raise the capital, and he can handle the management, right? Because that's what he's good at. Because I don't think you're gonna like that, right?
Right. And you would know that because you talk to the guys that run funds.
Yeah. So that's really what it is. There's I really say there's 2 components, right? There's the information side of it. Everybody gets up and shares what they're doing well. And it's at a fairly detailed level, It's people are sharing their org charts and their mind maps and their processes with each other.
They're actually vulnerable and transparent.
Yeah.
Which is not expected. Like, usually, you think of a mastermind. We all know that there's a lot of value in masterminds, but sometimes you go to these organizations, there's a lot of flexing.
Yeah.
Maybe a little, the numbers might be buffed up a little bit. right?
We start every event and have for 11 years. Everybody's got to check it at the door. You know, everybody.
Yep.
Right. The only thing that makes it function, the only thing that greases his wheels, is for you to put your you know. I don't know if you're listening right now. You can't see me. I was acting like a gorilla pounding on. You know, it's like you got to put that down, and that, because that's what makes it spin.
Right.
You know? So, but yeah, it's the information everybody's sharing, and then when they share what they need help with, that's where the connections really start to kick in, and we start to say, you know, hey, you need, you know, if you need help with this, well, I'm going to put you with this person. You know,
right.
You know, the Mark Dillatour saying, hey, we're going into those multiple markets, and we've got the connections in CG from the wholesale perspective, but now we need connections on the buyer perspective. Can you introduce me to some funds? Right? Yes, I got it handled. I may introduce you to some funds who can buy some of that product. And so that's the information and the connections. And then between meetings, we have, you know, like 7 different calls with. We have a COO mastermind to really help groom your second in command and give your second in command a spot to feel at home, and to implement all the stuff that we're talking about at CG after a meeting, right?
And also therapy for one another.
Yes. If you're an integrator for a visionary, you clearly need some therapy, right? You know, there's a sales call, you know, conversion call every month. There's a marketing call every month. There's a ops call every month. There's a financial call every month. There's just, and these calls are being led by some of our top members. You know, Eric Brewers of the world. You know, you got, once a month you get on a call with a guy like Eric Brewer doing 250 turnkeys, and who's got it playing big to teach you about sales.
Right.
You know, like, here's how we get an extra deal every month. We do this post-survey call, right? Here's the flow chart for how it works, blah, 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 right? It's more how to get more deals and how they're utilizing different strategies, where you're like a sales trainer, right? Once to get them to the kitchen table.
How to close.
How to close, you know? So it's just, you know, that's...
Oh, and then we got Ren Bartlett, right?
Yeah.
Talking about marketing effectively, what's working. And I think that one of the things that a lot of people see, like the texting and all these other tools that we use.
Yeah.
I didn't realize this until I got in. These were what you guys are talking about behind the doors. This is what you get in the mastermind. Yeah. Someone finds something cool, you guys work on it, eventually it gets leaked out.
Yeah.
But the power is you're a leading edge. Well, you get to hear about things and tools and processes that work.
It's not just that you're leading edge, right? Because if something gets leaked out, you become aware of what you should be doing, right? What CG does, what a mastermind does, is give you the how you should be doing it. Like, this is the new thing, texting, or this is the new, you know, using AI to listen to sales calls, or what, right? But the thing about a mastermind, the thing about something like the Collective Genius, is you can go sit with someone like a Casey Ryan, who's just a texting maestro, right? Or get on a call, or go to his office, and he just, you know, he opens the kimono of everything that he's learned doing it, the processes, the mind maps, you know, just like here, right? Yeah. I mean, you're buying speed.
Yep. Absolutely.
That's what you're buying, right? You're buying speed, and something that every entrepreneur struggles with every day, at least I do, right? Is closing the gap between what is your current reality and what your vision for the future is, right?
Right.
That distance, that gap, when you join a mastermind, that's what you're compressing, that distance, that speed.
Well, we all know time is our most valuable asset, but not everyone acts like it is, and that's where the value in that mastermind comes in. So I was told, there was someone that came on the show, and I was informed that Phoenix is now the guru capital of the world. I think we can, you know, take that mantle. But before that, it was Tampa.
Yeah, probably number 1 and number 2 still, I would say. Yeah, maybe close to it.
I mean, who was over there in Tampa? Because like they said that to me, it's like, who's over there? I don't even know who's over there.
I mean, you got guys like Lee Kearney. He's a guru now. You've got Delmar Cross. You've got
wasn't Ron?
Back in the day, you had, you know, Kenny Rushing. Who else?
I think I heard like Ron LeGrand was out there.
No, Ron's
not Ron.
No, Ron's not out of Tampa. I'm trying to think of who else would be. Yeah, I don't know. I don't keep up much with that too much.
I've got my own education programs. Actually, I used to have a mastermind, right? Yeah. I don't anymore, because after I joined yours, I don't really give up very quickly at most things, right? For me, I'm like, I'm going to do this, and someone says you can't do it. It's like, watch me, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so Ryan Pineda, we were talking about, I have my mastermind. He's like, dude, you should join CG. I was like, I'm good. I'm good. Right. And then he's like, look, just go check it out. It's like, and I still ignored him. But Gary Harper said, go check it out. I was like, all right, I'll check it out. And I joined. I was like, all right, well, I don't know how hard I would have to work to catch that guy, but it's just not worth the effort. Like, I don't think I can catch these guys, so we just put that aside. So I just want to put that out there for the listeners. Like, I think there's tremendous value. But one thing, and I've had this because I sell my own education program. Mm-hmm. What do you say to people that say, well, it costs money? Like, why would I buy it?
Yeah.
And I know we kind of touched on it, but what would you say to someone that doesn't believe in paying for education?
Yeah, well, I would first of all tell you that I probably wouldn't say a whole lot, just because, like, if you're at a point in your life where you don't believe in paying education, we're probably not a good fit or going to find value each other in the first place, right? I don't mean that probably that's not meant to come across as arrogance, but like
just different phases in our journey.
Yeah, like I mean, I'm almost 50 years old. I'm looking to learn every single day.
Yeah.
Right. So I probably wouldn't say a whole lot, right? But if I was forced to answer that question, I would say what you're paying for is not only knowledge, right? But it's really more about what we just talked about a minute ago. You're paying for speed, right? Paying for speed. That's what you're buying, in effect, is speed. You can go out and beat your brains out yourself, knock it out, right? But if you want to do it and do it faster, if you want to close that gap, like I said, between what your today is and your vision for tomorrow is faster. That's what you're paying for. And it's not always necessarily, I find in most cases in masterminds, it's not that something is being shared with you that is like some big revelation, right? It's how to do what you're doing better. Mm-hmm. People join masterminds because they have a relentless pursuit of excellence.
Right.
Right? And for me, it's not just like, oh, why would I pay for it? I want to come pay to learn. First of all, you pay for everything. When you're going to college or you're going to a seminar or whatever, right? You're going to pay, And the reality of it is, the better question, I think, is it an expense? Does it become an expense for you, or does it become an investment, right? And that's where the reality of it hits the road. Well, I mean, we might as well talk about somebody we've already talked about, like a guy like a Mark Delatour. He invests $25,000 a year to be in CG, right? He'll sell over 150 properties this year. Over 150 properties this year to another member in CG.
Wow.
Right?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
wow.
David Phelps.
Oh.
Right? That we're not to David, but through his organization.
Wow.
Right?
Okay, yeah.
Over 150 properties, right? Let's take, I don't want to pull your skirt down.
That's
right?
fine. You do whatever you got to do.
Right? But how long have you been in CG?
Coming up on a year. Just got my renewal.
Right. I won't get out the calculator, but how many people from Collective Genius, as of today, do you have as you're training their sales teams?
As of today, I want to say it's about 33, 34. I think by the end of tomorrow, it'll be over 40.
Okay, so I'll let you guys calculate this at home, but Steve charges for Collective Genius members $1,000 a month, right? So he said by tomorrow he thinks he'll have 40. So I'm going to let you take 40 times 1,000. I'm going to let you multiply it by times 12, and that should absolutely answer the question as to why you would spend money to join a mastermind. Fair?
Yeah, I think that's pretty good ROI. Right. I think that's a pretty good return on investment.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, I'll trade $400,000 for 25. Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah, hit me up, right?
Yeah. Well, that goes back to that transactional funding. Your partner. How many of these can I do?
Yeah, right. And that's why, if you got a question, I mean, whether it's to Collective Genius or it's another mastermind or whatever, like, that's the answer.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
So, guys, please ask your questions. I mean, Jason, I can't say he's an expert in all those things, but he knows. He's had intimate conversations with the top flippers, wholesalers, self-storage guys, talking with guys with funds, whatever it is. Please, guys, ask your questions, because even if Jason can answer the question right now, he'd get pretty darn close to it.
Well, the funny thing is most of the time my answer involves saying, let me put you with somebody who, right? That's your superpower. Yeah, I know who's good at what. And so a lot of times someone may ask me a clinical question about real estate. The reality of it is I don't know the answer, right? I'm a very active investor, but mostly in syndications, et cetera, right? I lend a lot of money. I don't really flip houses per se. And so anything that you do around house flipping most of the time is like, let me introduce you to so-and-so. Yeah. Or let me introduce you to so-and-so, right? And I don't know, from there, that's where the magic happens. But I'll field any questions, see if we can make some sense of it. One other thing I wanted to say though is because we just talked a lot about business when you asked me about like what is CG today, and the thing that I want to stress is it is so much more than everything we just talked about, right? Like I was rushing to get over here because almost 30 of us were out riding razors together.
Yeah.
A whole nother group got up to high Camelback Mountain this morning, right? Like it's a bunch of folks doing life together. Above and beyond just a business, whether it's having fun like that or, we do mission trips to Mexico and build homes together.
Or South America even, right?
Yeah, we've got a group going to Guatemala. There's a massive landfill down there, and a community literally is built around the landfill. And the way they make their livelihood is picking recyclables out of the landfill, right? It's crazy. And we back an organization that feeds those people, right? A meal for them is a big deal. And so we have an arm called the Generous Genius. I'm just getting a vision right now of you in your costume in December, right?
Oh, yeah.
We do some crazy stuff to raise some money and help some people. But my point is, it's just so much more than just making money.
It's not just about money.
Yeah.
It's not just about business.
No.
It's community and impact.
Yeah, that's really what we are. We started out, we would label it a mastermind, but now it's become, and that's what I like to call it, as a community. And, the entrepreneurial journey, man, it's hard. And a lot of times you don't feel understood, and you want to spend time around people that you feel like understand you.
Well, especially, who was I talking to about this? I don't particularly care for traveling, which is ironic, and I know we're going to talk about you and your traveling and how you're a little snobbish with your travel. But I don't particularly care for traveling. My wife loves traveling. But what's ended up happening is we're traveling across the country to go to these events because you can't find the best people in your own backyard. I wish you could, right? Even here, where we're the guru capital of the world.
Yeah, you got a pretty good backyard.
Yeah, we got a pretty good backyard.
Yeah.
But if you want to meet the best operators, you've got to travel across the country. And so, anyway, I don't know where I was going with that. I just want to throw that out there, that the traveling component is important as well. Alexis Adams wants to know, what is the best way, if you're the approach a lender to fund a deal, what would be your approach?
Of course, I'd want to dig into that and get details about where she's at in her career, but I'm going to assume she's fairly new.
Earlier, I would imagine.
Okay. The thing that I would say, if I was pretty new, I would approach it with a plan more so than, a lot of times the biggest mistakes that people make is they're like, well, what are your rate and terms, right? Well, immediately you've relinquished control the moment you ask that question, or the ability to negotiate in most cases, right? And at the same time, we're trying to negotiate with the fact that you're new, right? So I think the thing that makes a lot of real estate investors great, the biggest transition I see when people get really good at raising money is that they offer a program or a set of rate and terms instead of just walking in, and what are your rate and terms? And our best of the best say, hey, here's what we offer, right? Like we offer 12-month loans at a 7% interest rate. We're going to, whether your money is active or not, if we flip the house and it's a month before we buy another one where we deploy your money, we're going to pay you regardless if the money's in use or not, 7% annualized. Here, that's what it looks like if you're in, so I would encourage you to come with a offering. Otherwise, you're going to end up paying 4 and 12 or something like that, right? But I think the reality of it is you've also got to, if you're new, you've got to appreciate the fact that you are new. And this is a risky business. And your first time or two, you're probably going to get schooled.
Popped in the mouth. I think that's what you were saying earlier.
Yeah, you might get popped in the mouth. And so you've got to understand the risk associated with that. Everybody always says, right? All they did was send a wire, that's it. Well, that's how it goes sometimes, and then sometimes it doesn't go like that. And so I would just approach it from, being honest about where you're at, telling that you're looking for someone to partner with you on the deal, right? A lot of folks start out, they got to give up 50% of the deal because of the risk, because of the overruns, because you don't really know what you're doing, you don't know how to manage a project, et cetera, et cetera. And ask someone if they will go in partners with you. If you really want to put them at ease, if you've been successful in other areas of your life and you're struggling to get someone to invest in you, if you have any other assets that they could cross collateralize, if you have maybe you've got a rental property that's free and clear, or maybe you have a ton of equity in your home, or the more security you can give someone and make them feel secure, the better you're going to be off. But I would just start the conversation, not ask, just tell, if you, the biggest thing about raising private money is you need to create the ability to have a conversation, right?
Yeah.
What do you do? Well, we help people, put inactive money to work and give them great returns. Well, what does that look like? You got to pique someone's curiosity. So you got to really, there's no magic bullet. It's really just being attentive and understanding that you have the ability to create the opportunity to have a discussion like that.
Right.
So
Robbie wants to know, if you were going to start on your own wholesaling, what are some tools that you would start off with?
Yeah. The crazy thing is now, we were talking about this at CG, it's gotten so easy because of the tools that are out there. It's no longer just like a CRM. It's like CRMs with all these bolt-ons, right? You want to send mail, you click this button. You want to have virtual assistants doing dialing for you, you click that button, right? And then they've got everything behind the scenes outside of just the functions of managing your customers, right? But how to get more customers. And we've got a great guy in our organization. His name's Gary Boomershine, and he's got a CRM with everything attached to it. It's he owns realestateinvestor.com. If you were to go there, he's got again anything you could ever need and want. But if I was going to start bare bones, didn't have any money, I would focus on what's called co-wholesaling, where go to other wholesalers in your area that are successful, right? Either offer to work for them or offer to sell their homes or bring them buyers, right?
Yeah.
Which again, in this market, they're everywhere.
They are. Well, but you mentioned, working for them, because that's something that I always preach, and it's not maybe the most popular thing, but when someone's new, I always say, just go work for somebody else. Learn on their dime.
Well, and again, we talked about buying speed earlier.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you can go study, you can go get in courses, but until you get in the streets, it's a different ballgame, right?
You can read the manual.
Yeah, you can read the manual, or you can get some real experience. And granted, you can read the manual and take 3 years to get where you're going. You can go work for somebody for a year, and it's like getting the lights turned on.
Yeah.
It's
it's all the context. I mean, even if you crushed in college, right? You got this fancy degree.
Yeah.
You go work at a corporation. Yeah. You're coming brand new. You're as raw as can be. So
I apologize too. I feel terrible answering something. We work with typically a more experienced investor, so I feel like I'm not doing a very good job.
That's all right. No, I think that was a good answer. So Reginald Davis wants to know when or what do you think will be the next big shift in today's real estate market?
Yeah, that's the question everybody wants to know right now. And I'm going to take a stab at what big shift means, and that's with regards to when the market might change, I guess. When COVID first happened, we kind of told everybody to brace for impact, but with the reality of it, with all the stimulus and the shortage of inventory,
helicopter money was what you were calling it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you get this vision of the government, somebody from the government flying around in helicopters, and they just keep doing it today or yesterday. No, $1.9 million, right? Trillion, I meant, yeah. T with a trillion. And so I think that we've got another several years of a good ride, man. Yeah. I really do. Even though at the same time I feel like things are bubbly, I think with all the liquidity that's in the marketplace and this lack of inventory, I think we got a good ride. I think it's going to be several years, even though everybody says, oh, well, there's a lot of people that haven't been able to pay their mortgage, and, they're going to take the moratoriums off of foreclosures. And I don't think that that's a big enough number right now to where we're going to have like this glut of inventory, right? But I think right now a lot of people are moving more so into new construction and building from the ground up instead of just rehabs because of the entry-level housing. Affordable housing is, that's just like a no-lose proposition.
Yeah, well, that's the reason why we prefer to flip under the median market price, because it'll always sell.
Worst case, you get stuck, you keep it.
Yeah.
But I think that right now, new construction building to rent is huge, man. The funds are coming back in the market.
A lot of money is coming into Phoenix. I know for sure.
Yeah.
And John Burns was that was talking about that at the last AG?
Yeah, and if a lot of the audience is newer, building to rent means basically you're literally building a home or rehabbing a home to put a renter into it, to sell it to someone, whether it's a doctor, lawyer, dentist, whoever, or a fund who just wants a performing asset, right?
Yeah.
And that's a huge trend right now.
It is.
Manufactured housing too is something I see really big. A lot of guys in CG buying lots and literally ordering homes and dropping them on there versus building from scratch.
Yeah, we've done really well with manufactured homes, and I think BJ was pushing that also a couple of CGs back. I want to congratulate you. I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about real estate market as being bubbly. So I've never heard it in that context before, but I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think you could look up and very easily say it's bubble right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But
bubbly. Bubbly is just...
Oh, it's a great time. I mean, we were talking about it this week, right? Like everybody's killing it.
Everybody's crushing it.
Yeah. If you can't make money in this market, you probably better find something else to do. You know?
Alexis wants to know, what are some of the keys to get to the next level?
Now this I got a good answer to.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the things that we're always talking about at CG is the difference between flipping houses and actually running a house flipping business, right? You got a perfect example hanging out there on the wall. We'll talk about that. And that's also when you ask about CG, we have our upper level tier, and then we have a lower level tier called Premier, or Select, I'm sorry, for folks doing like 20 to 50 deals, right? They're still effectively flipping houses. So how do you go from flipping houses to running a house flipping business? And there's a lot of different things there. And that, first of all, you have to embrace that you're not going to do that, or you're not going to do it well without building a team. And building a team is for most difficult, right? Because in order to get to a spot where you can have a team, you spent so many years in isolation, basically beating your brains out on the grind,
working 70 hours a week.
Yeah. And then you get to a point where you're such a driver, such a grinder, that when you build a team and you have to start investing into your team, it's kind of like you don't really know how to do that, right? I'm just trying to do what I'm trying to do over here. Make me money and leave me alone, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't work, right? You have to begin pouring and investing into other individuals so you can continue to grow your organization. So building a team is huge. How do you build a team, right? Why would someone want to come work for you? And that's when you really have to look and you got to say, I have to have something bigger than just a company that makes money, right? I've got to create an organization. I've got to put something in place here, right? A vision that's bigger than just flipping houses that people want to attach to. And that typically means that you've got to have a vision, a mission, core values that you can share. So when people are making a decision to come onto your team, you're defining what you stand for and what you stand against, and then those people are going to make a decision about whether or not they want to work for you based upon those principles, right? And what you're doing, what you're trying to accomplish, and who you're trying to help. So really getting to a point where you've got a bigger purpose than just flipping houses or buying rentals or whatever it is you do, and then getting people engaged into that bigger purpose, right? You're all on a journey together, all on a mission together. So I'd encourage you to think about what that is, and then establishing a set of core values that you're going to operate within. And if you're going to hire someone or fire someone, it's based on those core values, right? Then you can start building a team. But then once you build a team, you got to hold that team accountable.
Yeah, how do you manage and retain them?
Hire them, train them, retain them. It's a whole animal in and of itself. And holding them accountable is something a lot of entrepreneurs also struggle with, right? I've struggled with it, right? And so, then you how do you hold them accountable? Then you got to create KPIs, right? What KPIs? The different set of KPIs for my sales team than I have for my construction manager. Different set of KPIs for the person managing my social media. What are the KPIs? Oh my gosh, right? Yeah. Numbers. Data has to become your friend, right?
Right.
So I think those are some key things that as you transition into building an organization, right, that you've got to really put relentless focus on. And I truly believe that you're only going to go so far being selfish, right? Are you really truly, how many, I want to think I've shared with you, and I don't want to share the details of it, but there's a person on my team, he's been with me for a couple of years, and I've told you, like, one of my biggest goals is just Leon, right? I want to raise that dude's roof, you know?
Yeah.
Everybody on my team, right? Like Bailey and Dan, you have to have a passion for empowering people,
Right.
you know, and seeing them grow. Same with who you're buying, if you're buying houses from, right? Are you really helping people? You know, and I think as long as you get into a spirit of truly helping people, your success is going to be measurable. You know, I always say money is my result. It is not my pursuit.
Yeah, that's how you keep score.
Yeah. It's not my. It is my result, right?
It's not the destination.
No,
No.
it's not the pursuit. The pursuit is to help people. The pursuit is to help Steve Train get more customers. And I know that if I do that, I'm gonna make more money.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's I've always said from when I first started this journey, right? Zig Ziglar. You can get whatever you want in life.
Helping, yeah.
So long as you help enough other people get what they want in their lives.
And pretty soon you realize that, you know, depending upon where you live, but the majority of across the country, it takes work to spend more than $250,000.
It's hard.
Everything you think you want, houses, cars, kids, good education, go on some nice vacations, like really, it takes work after that.
Yeah.
You know, and so once you reach that point where your needs are so well taken care of, then you really start to look like at way beyond money.
Yeah.
You know, I enjoy making money. I'm not discounting that, but you reach a point where it's not an adrenaline rush like it once was.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think that if we look at, you know, we're talking about the tools and everything earlier, how, like, you know, all these push buttons. And to answer, you know, Alexa's question, if you look at a lot of people that come on the show that have been super successful, a lot of them actually, a good number of them were actually from Collective Genius. I didn't know what Collective Genius was really at that time.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of the guys that have come onto the show, you've interacted with. You got Eric Brewer, you got, you know, Jack Bosch, you got Doug Hopkins. A lot of guys are, you know, affiliated with you guys. But the key difference between the people that have been on the show and the ones that, you know, are still struggling is that they treat it like a business. They're not a flipper. They run a flipping business. They're not a wholesaler. They run a wholesaling business.
Yeah.
And so I think what you just answered, though, is a great segue for the next question from Daniel Nguyen is, how did Jason create such a successful mastermind that attracts individuals that are of, I'm guessing, my caliber or people ahead of me? Like, how do you create that?
Well, I would say, first of all, that was my intention, was to create, my focus is and has been for a higher level investor, right? So the biggest thing is just making that decision from the get-go, right? I don't have an organization that's going to teach someone to flip their first house, right? So I made a decision they wanted to focus on a higher tier investor. That's number one, right? Number two, I think the thing is once I began to really understand my ability to connect people, the results begin to show up for those people, right? I've never been one. You always tell me that you're a terrible self-promoter or a terrible promoter of even CG, right? Like, dude, you're terrible. But the results we've created have spoken for themselves.
They have.
Right?
They have.
Yeah, that's why you're here, right? You had a couple people banging your drum, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the way that I've done that is, one, I set my mind to focus on a particular caliber of investor, and number two, is that I focus on creating results for those human beings, you know,
Right.
And then to get really raw is, especially if you're trying to build something, right? Like, I can outsuffer the average human being. I'm relentless. You know?
I know.
Suffer. If you're trying to build something magnificent,
Yeah.
that creates legacy and that changes and impacts people's lives,
Yeah.
it is not going to be this just rosy walk in the park, right? Like, I get up every day and push the rock,
Right.
you know? Constant, relentless pursuit of excellence,
Yeah.
you know? And I just don't deviate from that.
Well, I think that's the key, though, because we're chasing, you know, happiness, which I think is a mistake, but you're chasing this, chasing that. What price are you willing to pay, right? Like, I've said this before in other places, you know, like, I wish, and sometimes I could be happy sitting in an apartment playing the PS5, right?
God didn't wire me that way.
No, I can't.
And
do
then
it.
if you did, that's fine. If that's cool, right? Like
Right.
I'm not everybody's meant to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
No, me neither.
Right.
No.
There are times where I wish I could be that guy.
Yes, I envy people that have that level of like, I'd use the word peace, I guess.
Contentment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm always dissatisfied. Right. I'm happy, but I always know it could be better, and that's what keeps pushing me.
Yeah.
It's the reason why I wake up at 5 a.m. to go run sprints. I'm a 41-year-old man.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of the comfort under the blanket. So I think your point here is that you're willing to outsuffer is a point I just want to make sure people don't miss.
Yeah.
What price are
I
you willing
hope
to pay?
they're watching, because like the way I was, like we were connecting right there. Like, I can outsuffer the average human being. Right.
Yeah, it's key.
Yeah. Like, and people ask how you did this. It's like, it's 11 years.
Mm-hmm.
11 years. That's just every day, just pushing the rock, right?
Which is kind of funny, because yesterday we were talking, and you're like, I'm busy, I'm working. And I was like, what are you working on? In which you didn't. I don't think you like that question, because you're like, you can't be asking me, like, Steve can't be asking that question.
Yeah, if I wanted to coast at this stage in my life, I could coast.
Right, but you go crazy.
I would go crazy, right? I just enjoy progress. I enjoy building something. I enjoy navigating the different levels of progress.
Well, the joy is in the journey, which I think a lot of people miss.
Yeah, and there really is no destination.
Yeah.
Right? You said something about chasing happiness, and the first thing that popped in my mind is you can't chase a choice.
No.
Right? Happiness is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something you attain. It's not something you buy. It's not some destination you reach. Happiness is a choice. You can't chase. You don't chase a choice.
Right.
You can choose right now, whether it's sitting on the couch playing Nintendo, or it's building a mastermind, or it's building a killer podcast studio that we're sitting right. You get to be happy, regardless of whatever you're right. But it is your choice.
Right.
And I know that probably sounds funny after I just said I can outsuffer you, but because you say, oh, you're miserable. No, I'm not. It's not about misery. It's just about being, God wired me in some way to pursue excellence in every facet of my life. And now I say that with a disclaimer, right? I got parts of my lives that I'm not happy with, or not proud of, or massive areas of improvement. So I don't say that from up on the soapbox.
Yeah.
Not in any way, shape, or form.
So Alex Barrientos wants to know, his question is, what was the biggest struggle in your first 2 years? But you've had an incredible journey where you have a lot of different things, a lot of different experiences. So what would you say were your biggest struggles in your early years in any of the facets of business?
I think the biggest struggle when I started CG was getting people to believe in my vision. Right, there was really no.
Well, you're the pioneer.
Yeah, I'm not the guy that invented Masterminds, but I'm kind of one of the if you will, the pioneer of Masterminds in the real estate investing space.
Yeah.
Right, and so, selling people, if you will, the idea that I'm going to put you in a room with a bunch of other smart people, and we're going to compress the amount of time it takes you to do what you want to do and accomplish what you want to accomplish, and the connections in and of itself will. I'm good, man. I'm already making $2 million. I don't need to, show up there, right? No, we're gonna put you around a bunch of great people. We're gonna have some fun. We're gonna help you progress. We're gonna get you results faster, right? Getting people to resonate with that when it wasn't really being done was challenging. And it's not just the having them believe in that vision, but it's a commitment.
Yeah.
Right. It's most of our members we meet 4 times a year. At CG Premier, 3 times for CG Select, but at the end of the day, even if you come if you say, I'm not going to come to one, I'm going to come to 3 of them, but not all 4 of them. At the end of the day, if you got a business, you got a wife, you got kids, you got a husband, active family, blah blah blah, 3 trips a year is a commitment. Mm-hmm. COVID actually made us better, because we've put together a very dynamic virtual experience. But prior to that, it was always physical and physical alone. So getting people to make that level of commitment was
it wasn't just a time. Or it wasn't just a price commitment. It's a time commitment.
Yeah. It's an investment in a multitude of ways, right?
You said, so you started around 2010.
Yeah, 2010.
Yeah. So I got into coaching around 2010, 2011, right? In my own just on the traditional real estate side.
Yeah.
And I can say, up until that moment, right? Because I was a realtor. I wasn't a real estate agent business. I was just a realtor.
Yeah.
I was dealing with the buyers. I was dealing with the sellers, right? And so at that time, if someone were to say there's a room full of people that are super successful and they just share their secrets, I would say, get the hell out of here. I ain't buying your bridge.
Yeah.
Right? Or your swamp plant, whatever it is you're trying to sell.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Why would they do that?
Well, yeah.
Why would they share their secrets?
Right? And so it wasn't until I got into coaching where I was in a group full of the most successful people in the country. It's like, oh, wow, there are people that actually sit together and share their secrets.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I can totally imagine how hard it would have been for you to pitch it, because 2010, this guy was not believing that. That guy was not buying it.
Yeah. Most people, they just, at first they can't quite register that people will do that they will share. And, it's funny, the other thing that we tell you, you heard this this week, there aren't really any secrets. There's only excellent execution.
Yeah.
Right? There are times when something new comes up in our space, of course, but the reality of it is that it's really about execution, right?
Well, that's what separates you.
Well, yeah, and you look at someone, we're doing X. Well, we're doing that. Oh, but they're doing it so much better than you are, right? Yeah. So they're running circles.
Well,
so will you help me, right? We're doing this over here, right? But you are doing it 10 times better, 10 times faster than we are. Will you show me how you're doing it? That's where the magic happens.
Well, my plan for my team is we're going to take Jason Lewis's presentation, and we're going to watch it once a week.
Yeah, because it's so, if you just pick that one thing, you can work on that for a quarter.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
So we can go from profitability, the 25 to 40 range, to 60.
Yeah. Yeah, Jason did a presentation on, he's running high 60, 70% margin.
Yeah.
Right? Because of execution.
And because of that presentation, I'm going to hire more bros.
More bros. Yeah, that's funny. More bros, right? Yeah.
We need more bros.
But yeah, that's what it is. That's the reference, right? Jason got up and did about a 90-minute presentation about how he's created almost a 70% margin in his business, and gave it, the level of detail was amazing, right? Here's who I hire. Here's how I hire them. Here's what their profile looks like. Here's their descriptions. Here's the KPIs. Here's everything.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not only that it's like he did the 90-minute presentation. You have befriended Jason, and you can now call him up at any point, at any time, and say, hey, I'm a little unclear on this piece right here.
Yeah.
Right? Can you walk me through that? Or can we get on a Zoom and hold my hand? Right?
And he will.
Yeah, or he might say, hey, let me get my integrator, my COO on the call with your COO who's responsible for executing it. Let's let them tear it up, right?
And Jason and I are both Darren Hardy super fans, so we're actually going through Hero's Journey.
Yeah,
together as well.
Yeah, that dude's Darren Hardy's a savage.
So Daniel's follow-up question, what is one piece of wisdom you would share to entrepreneurs earlier in their journey?
Ooh,
there's a lot of them, so what's one piece?
Yeah, one. Wow, one piece. That is super hard. Maybe that in and of itself, maybe what I just said, and it's not meant to be discouraging, but more so to prepare you for the journey. I said one piece, that's super hard. It's going to be super hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, that's not in any way, shape, or form to sound discouraging, but just that you're going to have to be relentless.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the reason why you look in our room, right? I think it was Gary Harper said, like, Mavericks are like less than 5% of the population.
Yeah.
But there are a crap load of Mavericks within Collective Genius.
Mavericks, strategists. Yeah, there's a bunch of, like me and Frank. Frank's a strategist. There's a ton of strategists in Mavericks and CG.
Right. And the reason, and for those of you guys that know what we're talking about, if you look at just a disc profile, that's D, right? Super high D.
Yeah. It's literally, it's like a diagnosis of your personality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're super high D. But the reason why is because there's going to be a lot of days that suck.
Yeah.
And you have to persevere.
Yeah.
You have to overcome.
Here's the crazier part, right? You do that. You're ruthless. You're relentless to get to a point where you can have this vision of life that you envision, that you think will be how you want it, right? And one of the biggest things that came up this week at CG was once you actually arrive at that spot, right, where you look up and you're like, wow, like pretty much everything I had seen everything I had envisioned is real in my life. And the very habits, the very ruthlessness that you had embodied to get to that spot are the very same habits that must be broken in order for you to actually enjoy it.
Yeah. It's deep.
Yes.
It's
deep. That, like, you got to let that simmer for a second.
Right.
The very habits of ruthlessness, of just dogged determination, of, every day, closing that gap between your today versus your vision of the future. Like, once you actually get to a spot where you're like, wow, 99% of what I had envisioned is now here. In order for you to be able to actually enjoy it and to be the father or the mother or the husband or the wife or to actually, you actually have to break some of those habits.
Well, it might be the reason why there are so many athletes that retire and come back.
Yeah.
Because they can't be that guy that's retired.
Yeah. And I don't even know that it's about retiring as much as it is like, I'll just give you some examples, right? I'm there when I'm running CG in the hot seats, I'm taking what your all's needs are and helping you close the gap. But I'm also taking wins and writing down my own personal things I need to change, things I need to shift, right? And the majority of them were not business-wise. They were commitments to, like, and I want to make sure as I classify this, it's like I'm a good father. I take my little girl to school. We read at night. I put her to bed several nights a week. My wife and I are a great team. But I do work every day. I do go to work every day, and I push. And I thought to myself, why is it that, my wife and I have date night every Friday night, but why don't I once a week or once every 2 weeks go to lunch with my wife? I can, but to get to the point to where I can, it's required habitual patterns that must be broken now that I can.
Yeah.
Right? Why is it that I don't once a week or once every 2 weeks go and pick up Ava at school at 2:45 in the middle of the day and don't go back to work? Not that I don't want to. It's just that those habits that got to the point where I could be able to go and pick up Ava at 2:45 in the middle of the day and not go back to work are the habits that have to be broken.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, now you're speaking to me right now.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. Harnessing that drive when it has become the whipping beast that you have to just every day, and now saying, I'm here. Not that you can't continue to grow, not that you can't continue to push, not that you can continue to strive, but maybe need to divert. I'm hitting you right now.
You are hitting me right now. You are.
Me too, bro. Yeah. Me too.
No, that's deep. Something I got to think about.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the other thing too about CG. Any other a mastermind will. The right mastermind will peel back the layers of your heart. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. We've experienced that. Yeah. Definitely. So, is that the struggle, or would you say there's a bigger struggle for you right now?
I'm a control freak. Detail is, it's like, if you were looking at my birth certificate, it's like Jason Detail Medley. So, although earlier I'm talking about... Which is
interesting because you're a driver and you love people.
Yeah.
Usually details does not follow that.
Yeah, no, I'm a weird, I'm like a 50-50 split visionary COO, like, but I've reached a point in my life where I don't enjoy integration anymore, right? But again, it's been habitual. And so now I'm at a phase where I've got to really focus on letting go of things. And my team wants that too, right? Like,
not just want that, they want not just because they don't want you in it. They want that for you.
Well, yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's difficult to intake. Right?
Right.
Because as much as you want them to grow, they're kind of like, well, we want you to too.
Yeah.
And yet there's this, like, well, if you guys are up here pushing, I need to be up here pushing. I'm going to feel guilty.
Right.
I'm going to feel guilty. And you're kind of like, you you got to come to peace with that,
Right.
And so that's very much where I'm at right now, is just kind of like, and I've got a great team, right?
You do have an incredible team.
Yeah. I mean, we got some fabulous people on our team. We need a few more to really plug some of the holes in our business. And that's my struggle, is relinquishing, after that, we talked about that kick in the face in 2008. Well, after that happens, once you carry around some scars.
Oh yeah.
From that, and everything you begin to, instead of focusing sometimes on, well, if I hire this individual, it's going to give me more freedom. And after that first initial 6 months, it's not going to be an expense. They're going to take us to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But sometimes your first thought, your first inclination, your first knee-jerk reaction is, oh, that person's going to be $15,000 a month or $180,000 salary, and it's going to be 6 months before they figure out what they're doing, and then another 6 months before they catch their stride. So you start that little wicked beast in your brain.
Well, because you've had the times where your expense was really high.
Yeah.
And the revenue was not.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that's a battle for me. Yeah. I hear that little beep, 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 and you're like, nah, I'm not having you today.
Right. Well, that goes, we talk about me personally, that we don't make the best financial decisions as far as buying rental properties. We don't believe in the leverage thing to the same degree that a lot of people preach.
Yeah.
Because we went through it and we saw who suffered
and
who thrived.
Yeah.
And the guys that thrived were really cash rich, and they just bought properties cash.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it kind of goes back to our earlier conversation when we were talking about, if you're new in the business, a lot of that, that's part of the attraction to real estate. Oh, I'm going to passive income, I can get some passive income, right?
Right.
Here's the reality of it. If you want to build a business, every time you get some traction, you strip money off, right? You can pay cash because you're at a different level in your life. You're making a lot of money, right? When you get started and you're building, if you want to make a career in real estate, if too soon you begin taking profitability and buying rental properties, right, you're suffocating your ability to grow the business.
The oxygen.
Yes, it is the oxygen of growing the business, right? So you're beating your brains out like, I'm killing myself. I can't hire anybody. I don't have any money to hire anybody. And you don't have any money to hire anybody because you're buying rental properties, right? You're suffocating the business. And you can carry that, noose around here for way too long. I mean, there's guys in CG. I think of one right now. He's probably worth $10 million, right? He called me. This was a few months back. I don't even know why I'm doing this. We're not making any money. And we get to talking, and he added like 45 or 50 rentals to his portfolio last year, and I'm like, I'm not gonna say his name, right? I'm like, dude, you're making a fortune, but it's not showing up your P&L. You're shifting it to your balance sheet, right? And you're miserable because your team's too small. So instead of buying 4 properties a month, why don't you buy 3 and take the money you were going to spend on the 4th,
right,
and hire some people to help you so you're not miserable.
Yeah.
Right? And he was also judging himself off of P&L that is being decimated because he's buying rentals, right? Not selling some of those houses, which show, and then at the same time using depreciation to, I'm like, man, you're not looking at the whole picture here.
Yeah.
Right. So I would encourage anybody, if you get a business, again, where it's consistent, predictable, and reliable, and spitting off profit before you go, but because even if you get to 10 rentals, average rental property is going to throw off $200 a month, $300 a month. If something goes wrong and your business isn't profitable, what are you going to do with $2,000?
Yeah.
Not much.
Not a lot.
It's
not covering payroll. That's
right.
for sure.
Versus if you've got $200,000 sunk into those 10 properties.
Yeah.
If something goes wrong, you want to have the $200,000. You want to have a couple of grand a month, and yeah.
Yeah.
And it ain't. And that's all a game. It's all a joke anyway, right? Passive is not really passive until you have, a bunch of them that somebody else is managing.
Yeah. If you're like a Nathan Brooks or something like that.
Yeah.
Then it's passive.
Yeah.
Now you're hunting across the country. I was talking to him the other day, 2 days ago. He's just traveling the country just to hunt. Incredible.
Yeah.
So we're gonna. I think a lot of people here are saying that this is deep. They really like this conversation. But I want to pivot here. I am now looking to you whenever I need to travel. So we were having a conversation. yesterday, the day before, I think you were saying that you're known in our group as the travel snob.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Okay. All right. So people have, I'm fairly, my wife and I, this is another great rule for people getting started out. Not even just started out, right? But even again, making money is a skill set, keeping it's a discipline. We probably live on about 20%. That might even be a stretch of what we make, right? But everybody's got stuff that they'll blow money on, and for me, it's vacations.
Yeah.
When we go to travel, we get an Airbnb. I mean, I will literally, I kid you not, spend, now this is for a multitude of reasons, but I could spend 20 hours flicking through VRBO, right?
Yeah.
Because that's something, I'm a view guy, right? Some people need drugs. I need a good view to come, just, right, just, and so I will spend up, and it's not only for me, but a lot of times I like to go and take friends, and I want to see that expression when they walk in the door. That's joy for me, right? So when we walk in and they go,
well, yeah, the view is what else are you going to do if you don't have a view? What's the point?
Yeah.
So for those listening, top 2 or 3 destinations. If they were to go like that, this is Jason Medley approved. Travel.
Yeah. Top 2 to 3 destinations. I'm a Mexico fan. I would even go as far as aficionado. Been all over, you name it. Right. Special little places. One is Zihuatanejo.
So you have to spell that one.
Zihaujetieno. Zihuatanejo. If you just type in Zihua, Zihau, I think, or Zihua, one of the two. It was actually, if you've ever, you probably got a younger audience, right? But in Shawshank Redemption, which is a legendary movie, Andy ran off to Zihuatanejo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and Zihuatanejo is just an epic. The beauty is staggering, and I like to fly high. I like to feel like an eagle, and a lot of the houses are up on the cliffs with infinity pools, and I just like to survey the scene. We took a bunch of folks from CG there last year. I would like to do it again later this year, and then probably my favorite spot. Maybe a few people heard of Costa Cries, but I'd almost bet you nobody's heard of Costa. Or maybe a few people have heard of Zihuatanejo, but I almost bet you nobody's heard of Costa Carayas. It's a gem, southern Pacific coast of Mexico, and it's like, I don't even know how to, there's nothing there but about 150 of the most extravagant villas you've ever seen they're hard to take in, right? Yeah, like hard to take in. Nothing there. There's not a lot. This is a place you go to disconnect, right? If you need to shop, if you need to go to the disco, this is not for you.
Yeah.
Right. There's it's a section of the Mexican coast. All these houses are built on cliffs, 150, 200 feet in the sky, overlooking the ocean, and it's almost like 150 of these are houses I would rent but couldn't buy. These are, massively, they're probably $10 million plus homes, and they're just difficult to describe. Yeah. If you want to, the place we stayed at is called Casa Ensueño. Website. This guy has 3 of these. His website's called 3casas.com. Right. He has 3.
I still have that bookmarked on my website.
Yeah. 3 homes. The owner of these, and we stayed at Casa Ensueño. Go to 3casas.com. Check out Casa Ensueño. It's just, and it's a home, but it has hotel service, right? So if you're sitting at the pool and you need a drink, or there's someone there, and it's just, I think about it constantly.
Yeah.
To return, to go back,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that, and I went with Mark De La Tour, his family, another CG member, and it's just look, I'm trying to find the word, right? I can't.
Speechless.
Yeah.
Speechless.
Yeah, it's a little hidden gem.
So, as we wrap up, guys, if you have any more questions, now's the time to ask it. What is your superpower?
I think my superpower is connecting people, and for a dude, I'm not afraid to show emotion. And in our world,
this is very true.
Yeah.
I've witnessed it multiple times.
Yeah. In our world, it's not intentional. It's something I literally try to fight. I literally try to talk myself out of it. But if it happens, I can't. And in our world today, it's like, difficult to come by is what people tell me. That that as a man, I'm willing to share emotion about certain things, or to get emotional about things that touch my heart.
Yeah. And
to me, when it's happening, a lot of times when I get emotional, I'm like, oh, like I'm a man. How do I? And the reality of it is, in more cases than not, if I get emotional about something or shed tears over something, people usually come up to me and say, "That's what makes you you."
Yeah.
That's why I like you.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, that I'm not. And I shouldn't even say I'm not afraid, because usually I'm fighting it, but I don't do a good job of it. But really, I think it's connecting people and wanting the best for human beings, and knowing who to. That's how my brain operates. When I'm talking to somebody, right? It's flipping through the files, right? How can I help? Yeah. How can I help this person? Who can I connect them with that can
you got
make their lives easier?
You got incredible. I would say Rolodex, but that's really old school. So I guess incredible CRM in there.
Yeah. Oh God, I felt so out of touch the other day. Like, two people were, instead of trading business cards, they were like saying, "Here's my IG."
Oh yeah.
And I was like, I don't even know my IG. I think I've got one.
You got one.
We just hired somebody to put stuff on it, right? But I really wouldn't know.
Yeah. When people ask me for business card, I was like, "What's your IG?"
Yeah. I'm out of touch, man.
I haven't had a business card. I don't know how many years.
Me neither. I don't carry one.
What is your favorite, best, or most interesting failure?
Most interesting failure. Interesting failure. The funny thing is my brain really has to think through that, because I don't identify what people call failures as failures. I always see them as opportunities to learn and to bridge the gap and figure out how I can get better, right? More like a lesson than a failure.
Yeah.
But gosh, I don't. I think life is full of. I fail every day. I fail every day. That's what. If you're relentless, you push past those failures, right? Like, you just. But I don't see them as failures. I just see them as part of life. I'm a very grateful human being, and I think if you focus on too much failure, you can't be gracious.
We had an event out here on Sunday, which worked out really well. And someone asked, like, the four of us, right? Me, Ryan Pineda, Connolly, and Sam Prime, like, why don't you guys document your failures more often? And
why would you want to focus on that?
That was my answer. Was that when they're saying, like, it'll help the people, that are going along a journey and share their, and I do share my failures from time to time, but for me, I don't, like, my brain doesn't even process as a failure. Like, here was a hiccup.
Well, it's not even that you're not processing that as a failure. It's that if you are trying to create the most out of life, you grow numb to failure, because you're going to get failure. Your failure is going to show up every single day,
right,
multiple times a day.
Yeah.
And so you just get to where it's not that you don't. Yeah, I by no means am I sitting here saying I don't have failures. It's just that I have so many of them in the pursuit of growth that I just don't recognize them as failure. It's just my bump. That's just, okay, we need to correct the torpedo. Right? A torpedo only gets where it's going through a series of failures. It's constant course correction.
It is.
Yeah.
And I read a book, like, for me, this pursuit, right? I'm trying to be the number one sales trainer. So now I'm committed to reading every single sales book I've never read before. Yeah. And one of them was Go for No. And Go for No. And the last chapter, or one of the last chapters, he says that we all die failures. And he doesn't say that in a bad way. He says that everyone has ever accomplished anything in their lives was trying to do the next thing, and they didn't succeed there.
Yeah. It's when you hit the dust, you should have still been growing.
You should have been trying something else that you failed at.
Yeah. Failure is it's a core ingredient of success. It's something that should be happening in your life every single day.
Yeah.
Right? Figuring out how to get around failures and just stop seeing them as that. They're not failures, right? Failures if you quit. Right? You failed if you quit.
One of my favorite quotes by Michael Jordan was, I've never lost a game in my life. I just ran out of time.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes time is what, like, you go into overtime. You get two teams that at the end of regulation are tied. Right?
Yeah.
You go in overtime at some point, it's whoever is ahead at the end of that time.
All right.
Yeah, right.
So my last question is, what book have you gifted more than any other?
Yeah, the book that I would say I want to set this up. Do we have time, like a 2-minute story?
Of course.
Okay, great. I'm not in a hurry. So I've got a library at home, right? I got the bookshelves like everybody else, and I am more of a collector of books than anything. I order books like it's going out of style. The majority of them, and I flick through the table of contents, I might digest 20 pages, and 99% of them end up on the shelf unread, right? I know what I want. And if I don't see that I'm going to get it out of the book, I'm not going to read it, right? Yeah. And so I have 3 books that I keep by my nightstand, right? 99% of them end up on the shelf. A few get completely read, and 3 of them I keep on the nightstand. The one that has had a massive impact on me professionally is The One Thing by Gary Keller. Mm-hmm. Amazing book about focus.
It is.
Yeah. After 11 years of working with a lot of very high-level entrepreneurs, the ones that typically crash and burn is not from a lack of skill set. It's not from a lack of education. It's not from a lack of effort. It's not from a lack of grit. It's from a lack of focus. Mm-hmm. Right? If you need to understand what focus really looks like, go read The One Thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's stays on the nightstand. The next one, and open your mind here for a second, all right? It's written by the very same gentleman that wrote Think and Grow Rich, right? Mm-hmm. One of the biggest selling books of all time about being successful in business. Yeah. Napoleon Hill. And he actually revealed, if you will, or defined the mastermind concept. The most common element that all of the titans of industry shared was a mastermind. Mm-hmm. He wrote a book called Outwitting the Devil.
Yep.
Staggering.
Mm-hmm.
Just staggering in revealing how the world works and showing you a greater lens so that you are not inside of, you're not, I don't know, if you, the Truman Story, remember, you ever see that movie?
Truman Show?
The Truman Show.
Yeah.
He's in the little bubble,
mm-hmm.
right? And then he got to, when you get to look, Outwitting the Devil takes you outside of your little bubble, mm-hmm. and it takes you from actor to director, mm-hmm. right? You're seeing what's going on and processing it versus being hypnotized by the media or all the propaganda that we're fed on a regular basis. And so I think for me, just, gosh, I mean, that book, I might as well have dipped that in highlighter. Mm-hmm. You know, might as well just dip the whole thing in there. I wasted energy. It's like there's nothing left for me. Everything's highlighted, you know. Also, amazing stuff about like what you should be teaching your kids. Mm-hmm. You know, he has like 4 pages in there where I was just like, I'm a failure as a parent, you know. And then some of it, so you're like, wow, at what age will this particular item actually make sense for my child, mm-hmm. right? Teaching them to think for themselves, teaching that helping other people comes before your selfish nature, and if you really want reward in life, they start there, like that little, like 4 pages of just epic stuff, and then again helping you see life through the lens of the director versus the actor in the movie, you know. Stellar book. Yeah, like I tell people about that all the time. And then the last one is it's the Bible, you know. And I don't care whether you're religious, not religious. I'm not religious. I'm a firm believer in God, but I'm not religious, mm-hmm. right? I don't have a denomination. But there's so much wisdom in the Bible.
There
right?
is.
Yeah, so much wisdom in the Bible. It's staggering, right? Like how you should live your life. There's so much wisdom in there, right? Even if you don't believe in God, right? There's so much wisdom in the Bible as how you should operate as a human being.
Yeah. Even if you don't believe it.
Yeah. Even if you don't believe in God.
Take him as stories.
Right? Yeah. Even if God's in question, right? Jesus is not in question. He walked the earth, right? But if you don't believe in God, that's cool. But there's so much wisdom. Proverbs, Psalms. There's so much wisdom in the Bible.
What was fascinating to me was, like, you know, I went through, like, it was a Total Money Makeover, one of the other ones by Dave Ramsey. It's like you would have a story. It's like, and then, like, here's the the passage from the Bible. It's like, oh wow, everything Dave Ramsey's teaching was in the Bible.
Well, I'm gonna give one more piece of advice. I know we're getting ready to wrap.
Yeah.
Right. And this is, for some people, this is gonna hit them in the gut. the knee jerk's going to happen. I can tell you that since I began tithing, right? Mm-hmm. Since I began tithing, I give away, if I make $1, I give away $0.10, right? Not all of it goes to the church that I belong to. A lot of it goes to Generous Genius and stuff, right? It's about 5% and 5%. The moment I began giving away 10% of my income, I have done nothing but elevate year after year after year after year, right? Now, I'm not just saying you give money away magically you get rich, right? I'm not suggesting that, but I'm saying when I begin to give 10% of my income away and become a steward of that gift, right? But I became a steward of money. Things change. Yeah, things change, man. At some point you gotta look up and say, I actually recommend it, whether you have money, don't have money, in between. But at some point you wake up and you're like, life is bigger than just stacking paper and logging into your online bank account. It's like the pixels on your phone changed to, there's more money in there, right? At some point it doesn't change your life.
Right.
But it can change somebody else's.
A lot of people's lives.
Yeah, helping other people can change. And since I started make $1, give away $0.10, dude, I track it. Yeah.
So I want you to think about one last thing you want to leave the listeners with while I make a couple of announcements.
Okay.
Guys, please like, subscribe, share, comment. Helps me, helps the algorithm. We can reach more people. And then next week, Wednesday, we go back to our regular Wednesday schedule. We got Philip Vincent with Mom's House. He's going to talk about how you guys might be missing out some opportunities with some assisted living facilities. And so with that, last thoughts.
Another CG member.
Yeah. I forgot.
I think you were just an example of some of the best advice right there. And you, in life, if you're just honest with people, right? Like if I were to go watch a video about how to elevate your podcast, right? They'd come up with some fancy way to maneuver or position around getting people to give you likes and share your podcast, right? Just be real. Mm-hmm. Just tell people what you need, right? Listen to them when they're telling you what they need. And, I'm not perfect. There's times when I'm temperamental. There's times when I'm pushing, I'm driving, I come home, I'm anxious. Like, I don't, but from being in CG that I always say, like, just love on each other. Life is short. Everybody's got different opinions, different desires, but at the end of the day, just be good to people. Life's so much easier. Life is so much easier, so much more fulfilling when you're just good to one another. Yeah. Yeah, and the opportunities are everywhere.
There's no shortage of opportunities.
The opportunities to not be a butthole are everywhere, right? But, man, I really enjoyed this. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I hope it was beneficial.
Oh, it's incredibly
it was great for me. Yeah.
If someone wanted to get a hold of you, how would they do that?
If you wanted to learn, more about CG, you could go to learnmooreaboutcg.com or learn how CG works. There's some stories there about, what we do for our members and how they achieve success and that kind of stuff. I'm not a big social media guy. If you want to hit me up personally on Facebook, or I don't do a whole lot of responding. So you're welcome to hit me up there and follow me. But I'm terrible about, like I said, we just hired somebody to
and I think she's doing a great job. And, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. You've been instrumental in my life.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Connecting with you was one of the best business decisions I made. I didn't expect that, right? I had multiple people say, you need to do this. But, once Gary Harper says you have to do it, it's like, what do you do? Yeah. You just do it.
Yeah, Gary's a sharp dude. I suggest you listen to Gary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you did.
I'm glad I did.
It's been a short ride, but it's been a great one already.
Yeah, so thank you for everything.
Absolutely, my friend. Been a pleasure.
Thank you guys for watching.
Thank you guys.
All right, so I think we're 14 minutes away. But I guess I got to talk to you more often about the family stuff.
Well, my friend, I didn't. You don't got to talk. We could hold each other accountable. I don't know if I'm gonna give you great advice.
But that thing about
Disruptors. Yeah, see, we real estate disruptors. Can't nobody touch us. And we about to give you game. Shout out to Steve Train. real estate disruptors. They cannot touch us. And yeah, we about to give you game. Shout out to Steve Train. Jump on the Steve Train. We about to give you game. REI's flowing through my veins. And you don't have to look no further. See right here, you gon' learn everything. Shout out to Steve Train. Jump on the Steve Train. We real estate disruptors.